all to be ready to share our faith, to give reasons for hope with gentleness and respect. And people tell me, how do you get good reasons? How do you develop that gentleness and respect? Well, you share your faith and learn from your mistakes, learn from your embarrassments.
Hey friends, it's Abdu with another installment of Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda. It's a series of videos where I and someone who does this for a living as well, who speaks and does evangelism, apologetics, engages in tough conversations, whether from the stage or one-on-one, where we're joined together in a little series where we talk about times when we coulda, shoulda, or woulda done it differently. Having thought about it, we review the conversation or the engagement or the encounter, learned from our mistakes, and then applied those lessons and hopefully got it better or right the next time. So with me today, I'm really excited about today. With me today is Dr. Hugh Ross. He is the founder of Reasons to Believe, and he is a scientist with a degree, a PhD in astronomy from Caltech. He's debated atheists and non-Christians of various stripes on various topics involving science and faith around the world. Find out more about his ministry and what he and his team of scholars are doing at Reasons to Believe. So go to reasons.org and also follow them on social media. They have wonderful stuff. RTB Official is their social media handles. Follow them. They engage with the material honestly, forthcomingly, and in rigorous ways. So, Hugh, great to have you on. Let's hear a story about a time when you engaged in the evangelistic encounter, maybe an apologetics discussion, whatever it might be, and you think back, I coulda, shoulda, or woulda done it differently, and help us out here.
Well, like you, I can think of literally hundreds of times where I could have done it a whole lot better. But what encourages me is to realize God doesn't have to use us human beings. If he wanted a perfect gospel presentation or a perfect apologetic argument to be presented, he could have sent his angels. But he's basically telling the angels, no, I'm going to use these human beings and I'm going to work through them through their failures. So just realizing failures are to be expected. And, when you look at 1 Peter 3:15, it's basically a command to all believers. We're all to be ready to share our faith, to give reasons for hope with gentleness and respect. And people tell me, how do you get good reasons? How do you develop that gentleness and respect? Well, you share your faith and learn from your mistakes, learn from your embarrassments. But you asked me to share a story. And I remember when I joined the faculty at the California Institute of Technology, the Christians there said, hey, would you be willing to do an outreach event? It's the first major university event I ever did. And, they asked me to speak on Genesis. So I spoke on the first few chapters of Genesis. And the atheists in the audience went really after me during the Q&A time. And they particularly went after me about my claim that the plants on the continents were created before the animals in the ocean. And they said, well, Dr. Ross, you must be aware that we have fossils of animals in the oceans that predate the fossils that we have of plants on the continents. Doesn't this destroy your whole case? And I remember sharing with them, plants don't fossilize as easily as animals. They were not satisfied with that. And then they went after me. It says trees and fruit and seeds. And I said, well, this is written in Hebrew. It's more generic. I wound up talking to the atheists after the talk for about 3 hours. And they were apologizing to me. Look, we're not here to destroy your faith. I said, my faith is not destroyed. But I appreciate the fact that you're sticking with me here after this is over, because clearly I need to do a better job on this text. And I said, give me time. And so I went back and realized when you look at the text, it says, let the land produce vegetation. It's the word dasheh. And so, and it's a highly generic word that refers to anything that's photosynthetic. And, that goes back to the origin of life. And then realizing that the examples it gives of trees, fruit, and seeds. And, I was correct in telling the atheists there at Caltech, the Hebrew words for trees, fruit, and seeds are way more generic than the English translation. After all, the Hebrew language has only 3,000 words if you don't count the names of people and cities. English has 4 million words. So we have a translation issue we need to consider here. But what I didn't really draw out for them, those 3 words that are used there, it follows after let the land produce vegetation. Here are 3 examples. It's not intended to be an exhaustive list. And it's also intended to be able to communicate to human beings in a way that they could appreciate. And so the author of Genesis 1, whom I believe is Moses, is giving them 3 examples that they could say, aha, I know what you're talking about. If he mentioned, aerobic bacteria, they would say, well, what are you talking about? So,
Yeah, right.
but
Yeah,
it's 3 examples. It's not an exhaustive list. And the opening phrase, let the land produce vegetation, basically encompasses all photosynthetic life. And then what I've written about in Navigating Genesis is that what happened in 2009 is that people looked at the evidence for vegetation in the continents. They could find no fossils, but they did find isotope signatures that demonstrated that vegetation on the continents predated the first fossils of life in the oceans by at least 200 million years. And then in 2011, a paper got published where they said, we found the fossils of vegetation on the continents that predates the fossils of animals in the oceans. But the caveat was they didn't find complete fossils. All they could find were fossil parts. The biggest part that they found was only 1 millimeter in diameter. And so it really explains why they had not found those fossils earlier. Vegetation decays very much more rapidly than the bones and the shells of animals. So we'd expect the animal body parts to be preserved. We don't expect the vegetation. In fact, I remember at that Caltech, they said, well, because I used that argument, they said, well, we do have, trees that undergo, what's that? Yeah, petrified trees.
Yeah.
But what I realized, I needed to point out to them that, look, when you look at the fossil record, you don't get trees until the Devonian period. Well after we see, that's like 375 million years ago. And you're not going to get petrified grasses. You will get petrified trees. And so, but I wasn't prepared for their claim at that time. But because of their challenge, and what I really appreciated is they talked to me after the event was over for some time. They actually encouraged me to develop a more comprehensive argument. And I tell that to people, hey, whenever you get embarrassed like this, go and talk to the unbelievers and say, tell me where I was obnoxious. Tell me where I wasn't well prepared. I want to know. And I tell people, non-Christians typically are really eager to tell you where you've been obnoxious or where you haven't been well prepared. They will, and take advantage of that. You can learn a lot from the people that have, quote, embarrassed you. And next time you will be better prepared. And hey, don't worry about messing up. That's how you're going to get a better answer. And so whenever I make a mistake like that, whenever I get embarrassed, I say, that's simply an opportunity to give a better answer. And hey, I'm going to be embarrassed in the future too. That's never going to end. But to see that as an opportunity to learn and recognize this is how God prepares me, because he gave us the command to share our faith so we can bring people to faith in Christ, but also so that through sharing our faith, we can become more Christ-like, we can grow in wisdom. Evangelism is just as much for the benefit of the evangelists as it is for the people we're bringing to faith in Christ. That's why he uses us and not the angels.
I have definitely found that to be the case, and that's a great conclusion there. That's why he does allow us to do this. It's not a right; it is a command, but it is a privilege as well.
It's a privilege, right?
Because of what the blessing we get out of it. And I can tell you, I've walked away from conversations very similar in some ways, where I've had lengthy conversations, and I'm wondering, why is this taking so long? And it isn't the fault of the listener. It's off in those particular instances. It was sometimes my fault. I either wasn't being as clear as I could be, or I wasn't listening as well as I should have listened to what they were actually saying, or I had forgotten to mention something that I thought an hour and a half later, man, I should have said this. Or I just didn't know what I was talking about, and I was waiting to figure. I was like, I don't know this. How can I sort of get a principle out, but then say the best thing I think sometimes an evangelist can say? I don't know. I'll get back to you. That's a great question. I'm not sure. Can I have your email or your phone number, or can we meet again? And do those kind of things as well. And you do. You grow so much more because of it. That's a really valuable thing to share, Hugh. I appreciate it so much. I think that our listeners and our viewers will be encouraged because, Hugh, you've forgotten more about the science behind all this than I'll ever learn, and most of us will ever learn. That's how much you know. And yet you have gone through occasions where you've had to basically go through and say, I could have done that better. I hear so many stories. By the way, folks, if you want to hear some really great evangelism stories about the way God has used Hugh in unlikely scenarios or on the plane or whatever it is, you got to listen to Hugh's talks. Go to reasons.org and you'll go to the YouTube page and you'll find out some stuff where you hear some stories like, my goodness, God can reach people in remarkable ways. So thanks for staying the course, Hugh, and doing what you do. And thanks for being on Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet.